Welcome to Lost Without Excel, where it is my goal to help you complete accounting tasks in Excel. I use Xlookup in a lot of my videos, and rather than try to explain in each individual video how to use the function, I want to create a short video here to be able to point you to this in the future if you're trying to use it for one of my other accounting spreadsheets. What I'd like to do is walk through what a Vlookup looks like compared to an Xlookup, because I assume a lot of you are using a Vlookup today. Then I want to show a few of the benefits of using Xlookup over Vlookup, and then a few of the additional kind of cool features of an Xlookup. What I have here is a very simple data set. Obviously, in reality, you're probably using a much larger data set, more rows, more columns, and so on, but for the purposes of this demonstration, it doesn't really matter if you have 4 columns or 40 or 20 rows or 200 rows. The concepts are the same. So first of all, for what you're probably using today, the Vlookup formula is we have the value that we're going to look up, in this case our tech support product, the range that we want to find the lookup value, and then the column within that range that we want to return. In this case, we're returning the price, which is the third column in our range, and then a 1 for an approximate match, or a 0 for a exact match or true false. So in this case, our 1 year tech support is $12,000, which is here. The Xlookup, or at least the basic Xlookup, is you're still looking up the value, except this time you're dictating just a single column where you want to go find that value, and then instead of a range, you're dictating the column that you want to return. There are more functions off to the right of the Xlookup, but for this basic one, we don't need them. So at a very, very, very basic level, they're both simple formulas and they're both returning the same value. But there are a few things that Xlookup fixes that Vlookup had some issues with. First one of those is, let's say that we are working with a different worksheet where we're keeping track of this, and we want to add another column of data. So let's say that between the product name and the category, we want to have something, some sort of note field here. Well, already, if you didn't notice, the Vlookup failed because now it's grabbing the third column still, which is this category now. So by inserting a column, or by changing which number the price column is in our range, the Vlookup stops working. The second thing that a Vlookup requires is that this product name needs to be on the left. So if, for example, we were to move our search field, or our lookup value field, or lookup range, to not the left, the Vlookup stops working because it needs this lookup value to be on the left, and in our case, it's in the second column. For an Xlookup, it's completely irrelevant because we've defined where the two columns are. So the Xlookup fixes both of those issues. So if you're getting a data source from somewhere else, so normally you're not doing it on the same worksheet, at least for my purposes, I'm usually getting some sort of data set from an outside program, and I'm updating every month or kind of as needed. And there are times where the columns are changing order, or which is an issue I'll address in a few minutes, but also the unique identifier, or in this case the product name, or maybe a product number or unique identifier, whatever that is, might not always be on the left. you might have, like, for example, if you're dealing with a university, you might have a student last name and then first name and then the identifier. Or you may have a student ID or something, or like a customer ID or a unique product ID somewhere in the range of lookups, but not on the left. And so Xlookup will help you with that because you don't need it to be on the left. The other cool thing that Xlookup can do is you can return more than one value at a time. So let's say, for example, I'm just going to move this over for a minute. Let's say, for example, so in this case, the Vlookup still works, it's just not giving us the price. But another cool thing we can do with the Xlookup is we can return more than one value. So let's say that we wanted to return all three of these with one formula. So instead of, when we do our Xlookup, we're going to keep it the same while we select our lookup value and our lookup range, but instead of selecting just the price column, I'm going to select all three. And when I do that, this will be filled out. The formula here in column C will fill into D and E and give us more than one value. So this will save you from, if you needed to do some sort of lookup where you return multiple values that were in consecutive columns, you don't need to write a different Xlookup in each one of these cells. You can just write it in the first cell, and it'll flow into the others. And I have other values here just to show that it works the same way as Vlookup, where you can copy the formulas down, and you shouldn't need to redo them for other values. So the Vlookup, it works as long as everything stays the same. Once you start changing things, so once you start changing the order of columns or inserting new columns, the Vlookup will fail, and you need your unique identifier lookup to be on the left. Now, if we continue with the idea that sometimes our columns are going to change orders, the way that I did this lookup, this only works if, for example, my price is always in the next column. Xlookup can help with solving another issue that I've run into. I'm going to switch to a payroll example, where this is the every 2 weeks when we process payroll, we export the data file from our payroll provider, and what we have is basically all of the specific charges or data points or whatever for all of our employees. I deleted the employees because they're not necessary for my explanation, but essentially the issue I was running into is sometimes these specific different codes may or may not be on the specific payroll. So let's say you were looking up, you wanted to know what the withholding was for a certain employee, or if this was, again, like a data set, like let's say it's a product list, and where you're getting the product list, you're always going to have price, but you may change the report that you're exporting to have different fields. And so what I wanted to show you is how you can use essentially an Xlookup within an Xlookup to create a situation where you can export data, and it's okay if the columns move or if there's new columns, and you'll still get the value you want. So I'm just going to do it for one of them. So let's say that this is our the data set that we get the first time. What I'm going to do is, instead of identifying the specific column that everything's in, that the price is in, I'm going to do an Xlookup to try to find the column. So this is going to look a little different. So in this case, my Xlookup, instead of looking up the product name, I'm going to look up the column I want first. And I'm going to pretend like maybe this can go as far out to the right as we need. So within within the kind of data set that we have, the first thing I want to do is find the column that's named price. Then I'm going to do this time an Xlookup to find that tech support value within the same range. And then in this case, I'm not going to do the first column, but I'm going to do everything else. So, and obviously there's no data there, but I forgot to close. And see. All right, so I made one tiny mistake here. And the range that we needed for the columns is, for this first part here, I only needed to highlight the rows, not including the lookup column. So essentially what I've done here is I've said that I still want to find the price for the tech support, but the way I'm doing it is it's okay if this price moves. So if this jumps over to here, it's still being found because it's not locked onto this third column here, because I basically said, instead of saying I want the third column, I'm saying as long as the price column is within this range all the way out to, in my case, I think AE or something, as long as it's within that range, I can move the price anywhere and it's going to find it. So that can be beneficial when you are getting whatever your data source is from somewhere else and you can't consistently keep the columns in the same order. Obviously, ideally, you would keep them in the same order, but rather than rewrite a formula like this every time and selecting the columns every time, if you embed kind of a lookup within your function to go find the column, you can save yourself some time. So I hope this is helpful. I'll be referring back to this in some of my future videos rather than going through the Xlookup explanation on each video. And I hope you found this helpful. We'll see you on the next video.